The following is a raw, unflinching, and massively expanded retelling of 4 real hunting encounters caught on camera, moments when experienced hunters stepped into the wilderness expecting nothing more than adrenaline and trophies, only to find themselves seconds away from being torn apart, shot, or mauled to death in the most savage ways imaginable. These are not scripted horror films or exaggerated campfire tales. Every single gunshot, every jammed rifle bolt, every thunderous paw step, every whistling bullet slicing through the air, every desperate scream, and every heartbeat-pounding second of pure terror was filmed live by people whose lives hung by a thread thinner than the snow under their boots. What you are about to read contains brutally graphic, skin-crawling, stomach-turning details of a wounded grizzly that refused to die after 3 direct rifle shots and charged straight at its shooters with unstoppable rage. Stray bullets screaming inches over a hunter's head from a careless road shooter. 5 grizzlies converging in a perfect storm of claws, teeth, and maternal fury that forced 2 men into a life-or-death sprint up a Montana mountainside, and a dying buck exploding forward, with razor-sharp antlers aimed like spears at the man who had just pulled the trigger. If you are alone right now, if it is dark outside your window, or if you want to keep sleeping peacefully without nightmares, stop reading immediately and close this page. These true stories will burrow deep into your mind like frozen splinters and make every distant snap of a branch, every shadow between the trees, every sudden silence in the woods, and every faint rustle in the undergrowth feel like the wilderness itself has decided that today is the day it finally claims you. You have been warned. On January 28, 2023, one of the most blood-freezing and heart-stopping hunting videos ever uploaded appeared on YouTube from the channel Stuck in the Rut. Hunting siblings Tana and Trevor were deep in the vast, merciless Alaskan wilderness, already days into an exhausting expedition tracking brown bears. They had been camping in freezing conditions, glassing across wide rivers, and following faint tracks for what felt like an eternity when they finally spotted the massive bear they had come for. A huge, dark, powerful shape moving across the snow-covered slopes far in the distance. What should have been the triumphant final stretch of a long hunt turned into the absolute worst nightmare of their lives within minutes. They immediately began the long, grueling stalk, dropping their heavy packs to move faster, pushing through waist-deep snow that sucked at their legs like quicksand, and trying desperately to close the distance while the wind kept shifting and threatening to carry their scent straight to the animal. The terrain was brutal beyond words. Steep, icy ridges, overhanging cornices that could collapse and bury them alive at any second, and snow so deep they repeatedly cursed themselves for not bringing snowshoes. Every step forward felt more dangerous than the last. Trevor finally got into position and took the shot. The first powerful round slammed into the bear. It went down hard. For a split second, they thought it was over. But almost immediately, the wounded grizzly rose back up on its massive legs. Trevor fired again, and again. 3 solid, devastating hits that should have ended any animal. They assumed the bear was finished. Then, to their absolute blood-curdling horror, the grizzly stood up once more and began moving. Not away, not stumbling, but straight toward them with slow, deliberate, unstoppable purpose. Its eyes locked on the 2 humans who had just shot it. At that exact moment, Trevor's rifle jammed completely. He frantically worked the bolt over and over, blowing hot breath onto the frozen mechanism, trying to warm it enough to close, but the gun refused to function. The bear kept coming, closing the gap from hundreds of yards to mere tens of feet, while the siblings stood completely exposed on the open snowy slope with nowhere to hide. Panic exploded through their bodies like lightning. Their hearts hammered so violently they could feel them in their throats. Sweat poured down their faces despite the freezing Alaskan air. They dropped everything they were carrying and ran for their lives down the steep mountain, legs burning with exhaustion, lungs screaming for oxygen. The massive wounded grizzly gaining on them with every powerful stride, its huge paws thundering through the snow. Tana pulled out her phone in a desperate, shaking attempt to record what she genuinely believed might be their final moments on Earth, gasping between panicked breaths. "We just had this bear. It came running after us all the way down the hill. This is the extraction blood trail. All of our stuff is back there. He saved our lives." With only a few terrifying feet left between them and certain violent death by claws and teeth, Trevor finally managed to clear the jam and fire one last desperate point-blank shot. This time it was fatal. The bear collapsed in a heap, but the raw, unfiltered footage of those endless, agonizing seconds. The gun refusing to work, the bear refusing to die, the siblings sprinting for their lives across deadly Alaskan terrain with a monster right behind them, remains one of the most chilling and unforgettable reminders ever captured on camera that even after 3 direct rifle hits to the vitals, a brown bear still possesses enough raw rage, strength, and primal instinct to end 2 human lives in seconds. If that final shot had been even a fraction of a second slower, this video would have ended in a blood-soaked, gruesome tragedy instead of a narrow, shaking, tear-filled escape that left both siblings forever changed. On December 9, 2018, a truly horrifying and stomach-churning piece of footage was uploaded by Darren from the channel Darren's Northern Life. He was out deer hunting on the very last day of the season in Manitoba, desperate for one final chance after a long, slow year with almost no luck. He had been carefully following fresh tracks through the thick bush when he suddenly heard vehicles rumbling on a nearby road. Other hunters, probably road shooting and desperate for any deer before the season closed. Darren kept moving cautiously, scanning the trees for movement, when without any warning at all, a bullet whistled straight over his head with a sickening, high-pitched crack that cut through the silence like a razor. He dropped instantly to the ground, heart exploding in his chest, whispering in raw terror, "Oh my goodness, that bullet just came over my head." Another shot rang out only seconds later. Darren scrambled desperately behind the largest trees he could find, cursing under his breath in pure panic. "This guy's going to freaking kill me. He's shooting right towards me." He could hear the unknown shooter moving along the edge of the field, completely oblivious that another human being was standing directly in his line of fire. The panic in Darren's voice is unmistakable and gut-wrenching as he realizes how close death had come. One careless, desperate hunter on the final day of season had nearly ended his life with a stray bullet meant for a deer. Darren later confronted the shooter, took photos of the license plate as evidence, and captured the entire chaotic, terrifying exchange on camera while his voice still shook with adrenaline. The raw, visceral terror of hearing high-velocity bullets fly only inches above your head while standing completely exposed in the open woods is something no hunter ever forgets. And this footage stands as a bone-chilling, ice-cold warning that on the last day of hunting season, when everyone is frantic and desperate for one last buck, reckless shooting turns the entire forest into a deadly shooting gallery where one single careless trigger pull can change everything forever in the most sudden and senseless way possible. In the next encounter, YouTuber Limitless Outdoors captured what may be the single most dangerous and heart-pounding situation 2 hunters have ever filmed in the wild. Adam and Shane were deep in Montana hunting black bears. They had been in the region for over 2 weeks without success when they climbed a strategic hilltop to glass the valley below. What started as a routine, peaceful glassing session quickly spiraled into a living, breathing nightmare that neither man will ever forget. First, they spotted one large grizzly feeding peacefully in the berry bushes. Then another younger grizzly appeared nearby. Moments later, they realized a sow grizzly with 2 small cubs was moving up the exact same slope, and none of the 5 bears had any idea the others existed. Shane, who possesses an almost supernatural ability to read animal behavior, whispered the chilling prediction that sent ice through both their veins. "This is about to get western." The bears converged like a slow-motion train wreck heading straight for disaster. The mature boar grizzly suddenly noticed the sow and her cubs and exploded into a full charge after them in blind rage. The terrified mother bear bolted straight uphill in panic, directly toward Adam and Shane's position. The 2 hunters immediately started yelling and waving their arms frantically, screaming "HOI, hey, get out of here!" at the top of their lungs, but the sow, fueled by pure maternal adrenaline and the desperate need to protect her cubs, kept charging at full terrifying speed with the massive boar right behind her. All 5 bears thundered up the mountain straight at the 2 helpless men. Shane and Adam were forced to sprint sideways across the steep slope, hearts pounding so hard they felt like they would burst, screaming and waving while the bears passed within mere feet of where they had been standing only seconds earlier. Had they not moved at the exact right split second, they would have been caught directly in the middle of a full-blown, violent grizzly fight with no possible escape. The mother bear veered off at the very last possible moment, but the raw, unedited footage of 5 massive grizzlies charging uphill directly at 2 hunters with nothing but open air between them remains one of the most terrifying and pulse-pounding examples ever captured of how quickly a peaceful glassing session can turn into a life-or-death sprint for survival through the most dangerous bear country on Earth. Finally, on December 2, 2024, hunting YouTuber Zeb Cox was out in the snowy woods of Vermont the day after Thanksgiving, carefully tracking deer after a fresh 6-inch snowfall had blanketed the ground. The conditions were perfect for following tracks. He had been moving quietly through the forest for hours when he finally spotted movement ahead. He lined up his shot on what looked like a solid buck and squeezed the trigger. The woods fell into complete silence for a split second. Then, instead of dropping where it stood, the wounded deer suddenly spun around with terrifying speed and charged straight at Zeb, with its antlers lowered like deadly spears. The buck exploded forward through the deep snow, antlers aimed directly at his chest, missing him by only inches in a blur of hooves and fury. Zeb fired a second panicked round, stopping the animal just in time. He stood there afterward, breathing hard, visibly shaken to his core, realizing in that moment how close those razor-sharp antlers had come to goring him on steep, slippery, snow-covered terrain where he would have had zero chance to escape or call for help. The footage captures the exact heart-stopping instant when the tables turned completely. 1 second he was the hunter taking the shot, the next second he was the one being hunted by a dying animal fighting with every last ounce of its strength. If those antlers had connected even slightly, Zeb would have been impaled and left bleeding out alone in the deep Vermont snow with no one around for miles. These 4 encounters were never staged, never rehearsed, and never fake. They were filmed in real time by real hunters who believed they understood the wilderness and had the upper hand, until the wilderness reached out and reminded them, in the most brutal, unforgiving, and savage ways possible, that they had never been in control at all. One jammed rifle at the worst possible moment, one careless road hunter with a desperate trigger finger, one perfect storm of 5 converging grizzlies, or one dying buck with nothing left to lose and nothing to fear is all it takes to turn a normal day in the woods into the last day of your life. The wilderness does not forgive mistakes. It does not care about your years of experience, your expensive gear, your careful plans, or your excited anticipation. Out there between the trees, you are never the top predator. You are only one single heartbeat, one jammed bolt, or one careless shot away from becoming the prey. Sleep well tonight if you still can after seeing how razor-thin the line between hunter and hunted really is. But remember, something is always watching from the shadows, and it is always ready.